My name is Alyssa Sarmiento from the Genesys webinar team, and I will be the moderator for today's presentation. Thank you all for joining. Before we get started, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. First, if you experience any problems viewing or listening to today's webinar, please refresh your browser, as that will usually fix any console issues. You also have the ability to enlarge the slides by dragging the bottom right corner of the slides window. At any time during the webinar, feel free to check out the resource list on the right side of your screen. Clicking through won't take you away from the webinar, as it will just open in a new tab. Note that this webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording as well as a copy of the slide deck via email in the next 2 business days. This webinar is designed to be interactive between you and the presenters. We encourage you to take full advantage of the Q&A opportunity that will take place at the end of the presentation. At any time during the webinar, please submit your questions in the Q&A window on the top right, and we will answer as many as we can at that time. Feel free to contribute or follow the conversation on Twitter with the hashtag #GWebinar and any of the @Genesys handles listed on the screen. Lastly, we welcome your feedback, so at the end of the webinar, you'll have the opportunity to fill out a short survey on today's presentation. Moving on to the presentation, let me introduce you to our speakers for today. As I mentioned earlier, we have not one, but 2 guest speakers from Forrester. First, we have Art Scholler, Vice President, Principal Analyst at Forrester. Art supports application development and delivery professionals who plan, build, and run unified communications and contact center workloads for enterprises. He has 35 years of experience that spans the computer, communications, and software industries. Art has a dual Bachelor's of Science degree in Computer Science and Computer Engineering from Brown University. We also have Liz Witherspoon, Senior Consultant on the Total Economic Impact Practice Team at Forrester. Her focus is on measuring and communicating the value of technology solutions for IT and business initiatives and providing ROI business cases based on the costs, benefits, flexibility, and risks associated with specific investments. Liz has a BA from Yale College and an MA in higher and post-secondary education from the University of Michigan with a focus on instructional technology. Joining Art and Liz is Lisa Abbott, Director of Product Marketing at Genesys. With her expertise in customer experience and engagement, she currently manages the team that defines the strategy and execution for the Genesys digital channels offer worldwide. Lisa is also recognized for driving the early adoption of social media for use within the contact center. She helps organizations that are looking to improve customer experience and evolve their customer interaction beyond voice to a true omnichannel strategy. And with that, I'll hand it over to Lisa.
Great, and thank you so much, Alyssa, and welcome to our listening audience. So today we have a very good agenda for you. First of all, we're going to have Art, who's going to take you through and talk to you about the market trends that are really demonstrating the need for an omni-channel engagement within your contact center. And then Liz is going to talk to you about the potential ROI that you can receive and that can be realized by deploying an Omnichannel Engagement Center solution. And then lastly, I will take you through some practical steps to help you get started as you continue to build out your Omnichannel Engagement Center environment. So with that, I would like to turn the webinar over to Art Scholler from Forrester, who will take us through our market trends.
Lisa, thanks so much, and welcome everyone to today's webinar. I want to first of all extend a great big thank you to Genesys for sponsoring this research and also this webinar series. Forrester Research has taken a very strong position in the IT market research industry by focusing on what we call the age of the customer, how to apply technology to help organizations win, retain, and serve their customers. So working on contact center is very much, within that scope of research and very, very important to us. But I want to kind of put things within a certain context, talking about the overview as far as, where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. From the standpoint of, and a little interesting entertainment type anecdote is if you go way, way back in the early days of telephony, and doing business over the phone or doing business remotely, it goes back to a funeral director who was losing business, and what he found out was that his competitor across town, well, his wife worked in that central phone office that you see in the upper left-hand corner there, where to connect calls, it was literally, unplug a cord and plug it into another socket. And so his competitor's wife was actually steering all the calls towards his competitor, and that led him to invent, really one of the earliest telephone switching systems. So the customers could arrive on his doorstep literally through the phone system. Where we are today is in the upper right-hand corner, kind of like your classic contact center or really call center, people taking calls kind of bunched in side by side. And really we've been doing that since the 1980s, and some of the early industries were like the airline industry, the original Continental Airlines chartering Rockwell to come up with technology that would distribute calls equitably across an agent pool known as most idle agent. Well, we've come a long way. And what I've depicted down here, and I'll talk a little bit about it later, is a contact center where the agent is actually taking live two-way video calls. A little more desk space. There's actually a webcam. There's two screens. That agent desktop has a bit more working room. So, we've come a long way, and one of the biggest things that we're going to talk about today is the idea of adding multiple channels. But before we do that, what's really on consumers' minds? Part of our research at Forrester, looking at how to win, retain, and serve customers, is to understand how consumers today are researching, are buying, or looking for support for products and services that they get from your organizations. And the first thing to understand is, and we've actually been in this condition for quite a while, where your competitor is no more than a click away. I mean, we started to do internet-based customer service support and promotion back really in the mid-90s when the World Wide Web first came out. And also we started to process emails in that time frame. But the idea here that, a number of decades later, that the availability of information, the opportunity to purchase goods and services literally with a click of a button or a tap on a screen, that your competitors are not that far away. And that consumers, as we ask them about their attitudes towards shopping and looking for products and services, that 55% will abandon an online purchase. So they've already started to fill out that shopping cart, they've poked around, they've explored, but if they're looking for an answer, which typically means they're looking for an agent assist in some shape or form, and they don't get it, they're gone. And they also want it quickly. When we look at all the attributes that we typically populate a quality monitoring form with, such as accuracy, empathy, use of tools, the right opening and greeting, the right closing for a contact, that time, and this is not handle time, the classic efficiency metric. It is getting to the customer's question quickly and being able to understand it, because the consumers are saying, 77% of them saying valuing their time is the most important thing. And again, the other items don't go away, such as accuracy, empathy, getting the right product, getting it processed the right way, and so on, don't go away. Now, when we look at this in terms of the proliferation of channels, well, some folks have said the death of the call center and voice calls are going away. Well, our survey data, which actually covers 5,000 to 6,000 consumers every year, we've seen this trend that calling a call center, picking up the phone, has been number one for years. But the idea here is that more and more and increasingly over time, customers will look themselves to try and find their answers. They'll go on their smartphone to a website. They'll perhaps look around on social media ratings, for example. But here what's shown is that 76% will go to a website, 73% will call on the phone, 68% will send an email. And so the multiplicity of the channels is really quite daunting for many organizations today to get the multi-channel, omni-channel question right. But this was sort of a watershed moment that the self-serve on the web came in the number one position, not by a huge percentage, 3 percentage points, but the fact of the matter is that we are on this long-term trend of self-serve first, and then through a whole wide array of channels, they will then seek out help, and we need an agent assist. And just to drive home the point about even self-service has this diversity of channels, technologies even like IVR or speech recognition systems, which is the second one on this chart, are also showing growth. So it can be an IVR, it can be frequently asked questions, it can be a virtual assistant, for example, but this idea of self-serve first puts more pressure on, and then our customers try to reach us over a multiplicity of channels. But that reliance on self-service leads some people to the conclusion that contact centers, meaning the agent assist resources, are going to shrink. Well, in fact, the answer is no. Now, what we're showing here is we ask contact center buyers, are you growing seats, diminishing seats, staying the same? Here we see that 13% are saying they're going to grow their seats by more than 10%. And the 51% are saying they're going to grow between 5 and 10. So a significant percentage of this pie chart is saying either keep the same agent headcount or grow it by a decent amount. Again, reinforcement that the need for an omni-channel engagement center is really critical. And when we turn that question into not only are you growing seats, what skill sets are you looking for to fill those seats? Ever since the early days of adding additional channels, which quite typically the first one back in the mid-90s was email, we had this sort of classic question, do we hire agents who can talk and agents who can type? And many of the other channels, such as responding to text messages or social media or emails, are more of that typing skill. But we see here that a number of organizations, 30% of them said that, we're hiring and putting in place that infamous universal agent that can manage both. It's a great tool to manage the diversity of work to drive increased retention in a contact center or increased progression that, add a skill. You can now go do emails for a couple of weeks or go on web chat for a while. And that from a staffing and an efficiency perspective, contact centers can gain some efficiencies that, the voice queue is built up, but emails we can sort of slim down the staff over there and move them onto voice. Not that everybody does this. In larger contact centers, say, for example, Bank of America has about 75 to 80 agents solely devoted to doing web chat. When you're large, you can segment traffic and still maintain efficiencies. But, some of what's in this chart may be the mid-size and smaller ones where, they have no choice but to cross-train. And speaking of cross-training, and speaking of adding multiple channels, we're in an interesting exploratory period right now with two-way interactive video. This is a case study from a company over in the UK called Shoe. They sell shoes over the internet and also in some bricks and mortar stores. Here in North America, there is a vendor, their name is Zappos, who they only sell shoes remotely over the internet, proving wrong that you need to go somewhere and fit a shoe and buy it in a bricks and mortar store. This was an interesting moment for myself as an analyst, having seen video kind of crash and burn 2 or 3 times before in my career. But there are case studies now where two-way video is landing and is sticking. In this case, the woman managing this contact center came from the bricks and mortar stores. Her vision of the contact center is that it's an extension of the bricks and mortar store. In the background picture here is the same color scheme that they use in their stores. The agents actually can grab a few specials and show the shoe to the customer over the video. And that she noted a distinct, measurable uplift in revenue, average order value, and less abandoned shopping carts over and above web chat, over and above voice calls. So very interesting to see where we're going with video. That could be a whole webinar in and of itself. Another critical element that for many folks, they say helps define omnichannel versus multi-channel, is the idea of picking up what I call the breadcrumbs. There's the children's fable about Hansel and Gretel that got lost in the woods, feeling that they dropped breadcrumbs along the way to trace their way back, when in fact the animals ate the breadcrumbs and they got lost. Our customers who go in the midst of their journey across touch points leave breadcrumbs along the way. We sometimes refer to this as contextual data. And what I'm showing on this chart is connections to each of the individual touch points, capturing that data, that interaction data, normalizing it, filtering it, and then moving it to an analytics layer that provides the feedback not only to the agent desktop, but also to those touch points to say, do something different when this customer shows up on this touch point because they're in the midst of this journey. If I'm in the midst of having checked the status of my flight on the website and seeing that it's canceled, well, when I call in, the IVR should know about that. And it should send me either right to the right agent who can rebook my flights, or a routine that is starting to ask me questions about that rebooking, instead of just a bland top of the IVR menu, touch 1 for this, touch 2 for that. This is not an easy problem, but it is one of the fundamental elements that underpins what we do from an omnichannel engagement center perspective. Another very broad thing that's happening in the contact center technology industry is the idea of starting to aggregate these best-of-breed components into suites. What you're seeing on this chart is Forrester's Technology Radar, Tech Radar for short. On the bottom is the time frame and stage of a technology. On the left-hand side from creation, and on the right side all the way over to decline, and going through various stages of maturity. The vertical axis is business value. So the lines that you see, the red line is these are more niche-y, sort of marginal technologies. The gray line is sort of middle-of-the-road stuff, and the blue line is your mainstream, contact queuing and routing, workforce management, quality monitoring, et cetera, et cetera. But you're seeing a clustering of a number of these technologies at the top of the maturity curve. And when we see this happen, just like we saw it in the ERP markets or CRM markets, where these would start to aggregate into more integrated suites, as we saw that kind of maturity in the marketplace. And we see this happening with also the move of contact centers to the cloud, that, what's available as a cloud solution, typically, there's more in the mix, and we have less integration points of pain. The systems, therefore, are less brittle, and we can change our strategies. We can change our routing strategies. We can do a number of things around root cause analysis and optimization, because the whole software infrastructure isn't getting in the way. So we're definitely at a moment in the industry as of 2016 where this aggregation into suites is kind of, really moving pretty quickly. Now, when we ask customers about, what are they buying next year for their contact centers, what rises to the top, and I'm not going to drain this whole list, but there's a whole set of choices here. But the one that pretty much stands out is multi-channel integration. People are starting to look at industrializing at the level of how they manage voice and apply all the analytics and the workforce management scheduling and so on, that for many folks who may have already done email and web chat and so on in the past, it's really time to step up and more industrialize those channels, instead of them being managed over in another organization, or being managed a little bit as an afterthought because it's only a pool of 5 agents, for example. And putting on the front end of all of these channels, we're seeing really deep advances in artificial intelligence and machine learning, where it's becoming more and more possible to put more intelligence on the front end to perhaps solve the problem, but also land it in the hands of the better prepared agent, because we've done a better job of taking in the contextual data, identifying the customer, and better identifying their intent. And once you solve those problems and get it better into the right agent, the agents then, because they're not doing the self-service transactions, which are the simple just queries, they're acting more as that advisor, that consultant to the customer to help them along the way on their journey. And just as another thing that's coming into play in the marketplace is that, not only the multiple channels, but, anticipating the multiple data feeds that are going to come out of the products and services that organizations are starting to build. This additional stream of data or information from thermostats, or for example, utilities have been putting in smart meters for a period of time, or security companies that are monitoring cameras and motion detectors. We're going to see an explosion of a wider range of devices that are connected to the internet, can generate a stream of data about their status and what's going on with them. And the contact center, this needs to be an additional part of the contextual data that we factor in to provide effective and efficient customer service. So Liz, let's talk about the economic impact. It's over to you.
All right, thanks so much, Art. And hi, everybody. My name is Liz Witherspoon, and I'm a senior consultant with the Total Economic Impact team at Forrester. And I worked with Genesys and its customers over the past several months to complete the TEI study that you see referenced on this slide. The study examined the benefits, costs, and potential return on investment of deploying the Genesys Omnichannel Engagement Center Solution. And I'll share those results later. But a side note, as part of this effort, we completed an online ROI tool based on the results of the study. But before we get into that, let's first have a quick poll. Lisa.
Great. Thank you so much, Liz. We would like to hear from our listening audience to understand what is the biggest challenge in delivering an omnichannel experience to your customers. Is it about channels still being managed in silos, or is it about outdated, inflexible, multi-vendor environments? Is it the lack of context sharing across the channels? Is it agents working from multiple desktops? No visibility into the customer journey? Or is it about outsourced contact centers? So I'm going to ask our speakers today, Art, do you care to take a bet on which challenge is going to be the most?
Oh, I'm going to say because there's an organizational element behind this one that I see out there amongst a number of customers, the channels still managed in silos.
Okay. So how about you, Liz? What's your thought?
Well, I would say that for some of those who are working from a multi-vendor environment, I think the outdated and flexible multi-vendor environment is probably still a very big challenge.
Well, great. Let's see what our audience has to say. So you were right, Art. It is about channels still being managed in silos. And I'd also like to share with the audience that this is our third webinar we've done across the regions, and we are finding this as being a consistent challenge both in our Asia Pacific and EMEA, across Latin America and North America. So very interesting. So with that said, Liz, could you take us through and talk to us about some of the challenges the customers you spoke with for our impact study, what they had to say?
Absolutely. Thanks, Lisa. So I see from the results of the poll that actually there were a few things that were top of mind and top challenges for this audience. And I heard a lot of those same challenges when I was conducting the interviews with heads of customer experience, contact centers, and digital channels. And in fact, I think based on their role, those challenges differed. So in addition to what you all said on this poll, the people I spoke with were really challenged with their outdated, inflexible multi-vendor environments. These environments were very expensive, difficult to maintain, and that led to problems with increased call handle times and transfers and suboptimal solutions for them, and they had frustrated customers. So they were dealing with that internally, but then they also struggled with some of their outsourcing issues when they had outsourced contact centers, making sure that the customer experience was seamless across all of their customer touch points. So combined, these challenges were hurting customers, and companies were feeling the pain. So let's hear a little bit in their own words about these problems. Said one systems architect of a financial services organization I spoke with We had no standardized desktop for the agents to be able to handle interactions from different contact types, as well as no true cradle-to-grave reporting. We definitely had a clear need to centralize and provide an actual enterprise platform that keeps the intelligence in-house while still having the flexibility to leverage any other partner for agent services. I think this sentiment expresses really well the need for a seamless approach to customer engagement. And another common challenge that I heard on my interviews was enabling customers to self-service and complete transactions online. And as Art said, this is a very important issue for everyone today in any sort of business. Said one head of online and self-service of a telecommunications provider, we have an increasing number of customers who want to self-service. They don't want to go into the stores or through the third party. Whether it's to sign up as a brand new customer or upgrade their contract, we have to provide them alternate channels. Customers don't see any lines between digital and voice experiences. They expect everything to be available at any time. And they expect their agents to know who they are and what they're doing online without having to repeat information multiple times. And the Genesys Omnichannel Engagement Center Solution for the organizations I spoke with was the means to both modernize their infrastructures and support an omnichannel approach to customer service. Now, so far, we've talked a lot about the before, this fragmented contact center approach of the past. So what I want to focus on in this slide is after Genesys. After implementing the solution, the organizations I interviewed were able to have omnichannel engagement that was reliable, faster, and more customized to the individual, no matter the channel. Agents had better visibility into the customer journey across the channels and then were able to convert or upsell them along the way. Overall, this increased enterprises' agility and their ability to adjust to the changing demands of business and customers. We heard a lot the words flexibility, nimble, and ability to change with the shifting business requirements. One customer summed it up very well. He said, "We did an extremely thorough analysis and full RFP to compare the top 3 vendors, and there was truly no comparable platform. The Genesys solution provides an omnichannel experience, is fully integrated and scalable, and is competitive cost-wise. We have a strong ROI." This came from a systems architect of a financial services organization. So now let me review some of the high-level results with you. So from this study we conducted, we found that the net present value for Genesys' Omnichannel Engagement Center Solution based on our analysis was $22.8 million. And this is accounting for the benefits and the costs over 5 years. The payback period was shortly into the 2nd year. And overall, the solution provided a 158% return on investment. The Genesys solution acted as a system of engagement and helped enterprises drive revenue, lower operational costs, and increase customer satisfaction. Before I tell you about the specific benefits that were driving that 158% ROI, I want to share the methodology behind the calculations that you see here. The Forrester Total Economic Impact methodology has been in use with Forrester for over 15 years, and it assesses the benefits, costs, risks, and flexibility within its model. If you'd like to get into the details of all of the benefits I'm going to share, please reference the full report or use the ROI calculator. But at a high level, here's the process. So we first conduct due diligence around the product by speaking with Genesys stakeholders and analysts. We then conducted about 5 customer interviews with those enterprises who had realized the value of their Genesys Omnichannel Engagement Center for several years. And then we designed a composite or representative organization to represent all of those interviewed and created a financial model to represent those benefits and costs they experienced. That then led to a case study write-up to describe the findings that we realized. So for this study, Forrester conducted a total of 5 interviews with global Genesys customers across 5 continents who are all in different stages of their move towards an omnichannel customer engagement center approach. These organizations were enterprise-sized. They often had multi-billions in revenue and included 2 global financial services organizations, a multi-billion-dollar Chinese multinational computer technology company, a global event e-commerce leader, and an African mobile communications company. After interviewing these organizations about the benefits of using the solution, we created a 5-year financial model that highlights the impact of the solution. So let me share here at the very high level the total benefits realized. The total benefits that these organizations realized over 5 years with the Genesys Omnichannel Engagement Center Solution was about $37.3 million. 40% of the benefits came from improved agent handle time. 38% were driven by reduced infrastructure costs. 17% came from reduced headcount. 3% came from increased revenue through improved conversion rates, voice and online, and about 2% was driven by the reduced cost to integrate new contact centers. Now, I'll next walk you through each benefit category to explain these findings in more detail. The biggest driver of the ROI was the improved agent handle time. Overall, it was reduced by 12.5%, which equates to about $15 million over 5 years. It's considering the fact that enterprises that are typical of those that we interviewed have about 3,000 agents. Before Genesys, these agents did not have an omnichannel view of the customer on their desktop workspace. Much like Art referred to as the breadcrumbs, they did not have any information about the customer, or very little information coming to them. They often had to authenticate customers more than once. They received very little information about them prior to the interaction, and often the customers were not routed or matched to the customer service agents whose skills best matched their need. So this led to even longer waits and transfer times. After Genesys, agents could service all channel interactions with information that was integrated, and it was integrated with a customer relationship management system and other applications. And there was also better interaction between the interactive voice response system and the agent desktop, which further streamlined the capture of critical customer information. Agents were able to resolve calls in a single interaction, and the agents really liked it. As far as you can see for yourself in the quotation here on the slide, agents were extremely happy with the single interface for interaction handling, including email. We've definitely received really good feedback from the agents on having that single desktop interface, and it has greatly increased their ability to focus on the important interactions and has enhanced customer satisfaction. The second largest driver of the financial benefits was the reduced infrastructure and operations costs, which contributes about 55% of the benefits. These benefits are driven by the reduction in hardware and software replacement costs and maintenance costs. It also represents lowered IT labor costs associated with managing the contact center. And also, Genesys enabled these organizations to handle increasing volume of omnichannel interactions with fewer agents. So that contributed to this operational cost reduction. One SVP of Global Contact Center Technology summed it up by saying, "We really wanted to lighten up our physical forms of connectivity from a hardware perspective and virtualize as much as we could. And the maintenance fees were also extremely expensive on the infrastructure we had. It was just inefficient. We wanted to gain efficiencies in how we deliver the calls to the agents, making sure that we had the best call agents to handle the calls without having several calls all over the place." Another important and very promising benefit for enterprises using the Genesys Omnichannel Engagement Center is the increase in revenue through improved e-commerce conversions. Organizations often have a significant volume of e-commerce transactions, both sales-related and service-related, because of self-service features and the integration of customer data from different channels. The enterprises I interviewed cited as much as a 50% reduction in customer abandonment at key points in the customer journey. And this was as a result of the Genesys chat capability. They identified 2 critical points in one example. which was both when a customer was selecting from a plan or a service option, and a second point in the journey at the checkout where they saw the most abandonments. And after they put in Genesys chat, they were able to cut those abandonments by half. Said one head of online and self-service, 1 out of every 5 interactions on the website prompts a Net Promoter Score survey. And we found that after we implemented our chat features, our NPS has gone up quite significantly. Customers were enjoying the experience a whole lot more. Furthermore, organizations may expect an increase in sales conversions for inbound calls after implementing the Genesys solution. This is due to having better access to historic customer data from all channels, and it provides a better opportunity to close, upsell, or cross-sell when an agent speaks with customers. The routing intelligence capability may also provide an increase in the number of revenue-generating opportunities presented to agents. So in this model, we used a very conservative estimate of the percentage of monthly calls that could yield a sales opportunity. And if your organization has even a bigger focus on upsell and cross-sell through the digital and voice channels, you could likely see even more revenue generation that's attributed to these features. But as one leader of omnichannel experience in a Latin American financial service organization said, the personalization and optimization of the call routing provided by Genesys allowed us to improve our sales by 20%. So that was really powerful number. Guarantee our model is much more conservative than that, but it just shows you the full range of possibility. A final benefit that is really significant is the reduced cost to integrate new contact center agents. And I say it's significant because you might remember Art shared the statistic that about 64% of organizations are growing their contact centers by 5% or more, sometimes more than 10%. So if you think about that, that's an ongoing cost. And the customers I interviewed reported the ease of integrating with third-party vendors or bringing new contact centers into the fold once the Genesys solution was in place. The flexibility of the architecture meant lower integration costs when new companies were acquired or multiple outsourced relationships were put in place. And the interviewed organization cited that they cut their integration costs in half with each new growth period. As one lead systems architect said, to add contact centers, we were able to just buy and merely configure the new agents and set up the appropriate roles and give them access to skills-based routing within our environment. We were able to reduce the implementation costs by half, and I was really happy. One of our project managers was looking at all the financials after the fact and pointed that out to everyone, and it was very eye-opening. I think they uncovered that they saved about $2 million every time they brought on a new set of agents, which was very significant and an unexpected benefit. Now, Lisa, I think we have another poll coming.
Yes, we do, Liz. Thank you very much for that great information. So now that you've heard all this great information from Liz about the expected return on investment for driving towards an omnichannel engagement center environment, we'd like to hear from our audience to see what is the top area of focus that you think will make the biggest impact within your business. Is it increasing agent productivity? Is it about decreasing the operational costs? Is it about increasing revenue from online sales? Or is it about implementing an omni-channel engagement? So Art, you care to wager again on what you think will be the top area?
Well, a number of these could fit under this, but I think a number of them fit under implementing omni-channel.
Okay. How about you, Liz? Do you agree, or do you have a differing opinion?
I think that increasing agent productivity is always an important metric that most organizations are watching and share.
Great. Well, let's see what our audience had to say. Omnichannel is our strong winner. And again, we have seen that across the regions through Asia Pacific and Europe, through North America and Latin America that, this is a key area of focus. So with that, I would like to take the next couple of minutes to kind of go over some practical next steps for you as you're building out this Omnichannel Engagement Center. And I'd also like to invite our listening audience to try out the ROI calculator that Liz has referenced. You'll find this in actually attached to your console here in the information, as well as it is on the Genesys website if you want to look at it at a later time. But feel free to go there and start entering in some minor inputs to find out what kinds of benefits can you start to expect, to receive. So the first area that I'd like to talk to you about is about delivering a personalized experience without the silos. As we saw in our questions, that is top of mind of all customers out there. And, it's no surprise, as Art has mentioned, with all the trends, digital is here, the multiple channels, the need to be able to self-serve. So this means that you really need to have a platform that's going to be able to manage all these different types of channels from a single set of business rules and administration and design tools. So it's only when you're going to opt for this type of a single platform approach that you can really manage the breadcrumbs, as Art had mentioned, and deliver that true, consistent customer experience and manage those SLAs across all these channels. And you can do this without having to administer and operate over multiple systems. So by being able to, orchestrate that next best action, you ensure that all the events and the interactions really end up going to that best and most appropriate agent, because it's, this type of approach was going to really allow you to design that customer journey free of silos so that you can truly understand that journey context based on that customer value, their historical behavior across all of those channels, so that agent can now deliver that very personalized experience back. And as Liz had mentioned, we've seen that having that personalized experience with those customers and that engagement can really drive a significant revenue as well as cost savings for you as a company. So the second key step that we should be looking at as we're building out our Omnichannel Engagement Center solution is around improving that agent turnover and that poor performance. We've heard from Liz that had, having agent satisfaction and agent efficiency really drove a huge benefit in terms of your annual costs. And so your employees, which are the biggest impact on your company, it's really important that you're able to optimize that workforce. And so for employees to be as effective as possible, they need the proper training and information to be made available to them. And when there is a management of the schedules, which is key to better understanding your available resources at any given time, this is really going to be key to creating that efficient environment. So as you begin to route interactions, it's important to keep this in mind, and utilizing those agent skills and schedules will really ensure that, again, that the interactions are sent to that right agent at that right time. And as you're looking at this area, other considerations are around the voice and text interaction recording. That has now become a requirement for compliance and legislative reasons. And so this allows you to really have a true understanding of what's really happening between your employee and that customer when they're, interacting with them over the various channels. And quality management will, again, ensure that the quality metrics are achieved, which has a great impact on improving that, that customer experience that we're all striving for. So our third and last point that we want to stress today is about managing that multi-vendor environment. I love the statement that Art made around the integration points of pain, right? We've created over time environments that are very complicated with numerous point solutions, and they're all very hard-coded. And, for example, we may have a separate system to manage our inbound voice, and then we may have another system that actually routes those interactions. For years now, many companies have focused on looking at best-of-breed type solutions for various digital channels, having a different one for each channel. Well, this has all been cobbled together and really doesn't provide that 360-degree view, which is going to allow you to, provide that consistent environment that's going to drive that great customer experience. So now, by building out your Omnichannel Engagement Center, this really provides the opportunity to shift and to consolidate these numerous platforms into one open platform that is going to allow you the architectural openness to be able to engage with your CRM, your system of records, along with your other applications across the enterprise, such as in the back office, to be able to create one seamless environment. And so to summarize today, before we go into our Q&A with Liz and Art, the Genesys Omnichannel Engagement Center is really going to help you drive those agent efficiencies. It's going to improve that experience with your customers as you continue to engage with them across all channels and touch points. And it's going to allow you great opportunities to be able to increase revenue, both an upsell and a cross-sell, and through conversions on the website or through the voice. And three, just amazing points of ROI for you to keep in mind is that you can be looking at 158% return on investment with a net present value of $22.8 million, with a payback period in just over 12 months. So with that, I would like to turn this back over to Alyssa, who's going to open this up for Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Lisa, and thank you, Art and Liz. That was a great presentation. And so as Lisa mentioned, this is the time for Q&A. So far, we've got a lot of questions already in the queue, but if you think of questions now, it's not too late. Feel free to send them through, and we'll try to get to as much as we can in the next 10 minutes or so. So just to get started, the first question is directed to Art. Do you think this self-service is impacted by the forcing of self-service by companies, those who won't let you contact them until you try self-service first?
So from the standpoint of when I hear the word force, and I don't have quantitative on this, it's more of a qualitative observation from people that I've spoken to and consulting projects. I'm going to be pretty blunt here. You can do some to try and force people to self-service. So, for example, on a website, make it really hard to find that Contact Us tab. And when you do find it, you don't find any information about maybe a phone number to call. But I see that as much more of a minority out there, that it's a better thing to continue to optimize and improve the self-service resources, such as the website, such as the IVR, et cetera, and make them much more effective. And this, the forcing people to self-service is, a very efficiency-driven, and that kind of flies in the face of the evolution of how contact center metrics have evolved. There's so many more organizations that at the top of the pyramid of their metrics, because we know we manage and monitor a number of performance metrics, is customer sat and net promoter score. And it is not a pleasing experience when we try and shove people off either with limited contact center hours or don't you dare try and call us. I think this growth in self-service is partially driven by just my belief is that we've just got an overall aggregate growth in interaction volumes anyway. But the propensity for people to self-serve first is somewhat of a different question. It's the consumer behavior of, right now I'm busy, I've got my smartphone. And I'm going to search on some sort of resource to find out first before I try and get in queue somewhere. So I think it's less of the organization taking a stance to force you to self-service. It's the availability of it. And people also have a sense of they're more in control when they're not hanging around in some queue.
Great, thanks, Art. The next question is for Liz. Do you define cart abandonment differently between those who can't find an answer versus those who aren't ready to buy yet but eventually do?
That's a really good question. I am referencing back in my notes and thoughts to the interviews that we conducted, and the fact of the matter is that what they saw was there was a new customer experience person who came into place and focused a lot on the digital channel and looked and saw that 60 to 70% of their customers were abandoning at a few critical points along their journey. Now, they didn't know if that meant they were just going to come back and purchase later, or if they then walked into a store to get served. They didn't have that level of detailed analysis yet. But what they knew is that once they put in the Genesys web chat feature at those key points where they saw the abandonment, it dropped from 60 to 70% abandonment to 30% abandonment. So it was a significant decrease where people were able to complete and move forward. Whether or not if they had the intention of doing it later or somewhere else, the fact is that they improved it dramatically. And this organization knows that digital is the most cost-effective channel, for their cost per interactions and even for their net promoter scores per interaction. So it was their best channel. And so I think if you in your organizations feel the same way about the digital channel, in many ways improvements don't have to be based and tracked and analyzed quite to the extent that some might think to see really, really positive gains.
Great, thanks, Liz. The next question, we'll direct that one to Art again. Are virtual assistants just a point of frustration for customers, or is it truly seen as a good means for self-service? What are your thoughts on that, Art?
I just published a paper about IVR, and I know the question is on virtual assistants, but I think some of the same concepts apply. Done right, with the idea of truly optimizing and managing these systems and looking at not just call deflection. In fact, there's a metric in the space for largely defined for IVRs, but can also be utilized for virtual assistants of containment. I hate that term, okay? I hate the thought of containing my customers, and as a consumer, I hate the thought of being contained. So I'm an advocate of these self-service channels being tuned and optimized not only from a deflection and an efficiency metric perspective, but also from the standpoint of providing a customer-pleasing experience. And yeah, we've had a number of organizations for many years, and that's why you can go to many cocktail parties and hear the anecdotes about the awful IVR experience someone had, and that can easily be applicable to Siri didn't understand me, okay? So they can be annoying, and we certainly have seen some of those, and of course, in the long run, they're just not going to be effective doing what we need done to win, retain, and serve customers. But the technology is advancing to the point where with the right investment and the right tuning and the right attentiveness over time after it's built to make these things work well.
Thanks, Art. I think the next question is also good for you. What are your thoughts about blended queues?
So we can define blended queues a number of ways, but let's just imagine that all of the contacts across all of the touch points are stuffed into a queue where I apply the queuing and routing algorithms to get it into the right hands of the right agents based on their skills and also based on the service levels that we're trying to achieve for those channels. Because, for example, email, we may put a service level out there that is 2 hours. Whereas voice, we might want to answer, 90% of our calls within 20 seconds. So I think that the whole concept here of an Omnichannel Engagement Center certainly incorporates the idea of blended queues when an organization's staffing and business rules and strategy also speaks to that blending. Now, there's a warning here, and I'm going to ask Lisa for a moment to close her ears, because some of the vendors, there is the if you can doesn't mean you must. So I've seen demonstrations and sometimes watched people talk about the idea, well, I've got an agent who's doing 2 web chats, and well, because the voice call queue is sort of overloaded, I want them to take a voice call at the same time. Let me be really clear. This is a very qualitative feedback from an analyst who's been in the industry a while. Don't do that. It's too much of a distraction to have an agent jumping around multiple queues like that. I would much rather see an agent be in a certain queue, in a certain channel, get a rhythm going, get some momentum, just really be working that one for a while, as opposed to this sort of, web chat now, email next, a voice call after that, and a couple simultaneously while they happen to be maybe not as busy. I'm not a fan of that at all.
Thanks, Art. The next question we have, I will direct this one to Liz. How do you determine the best omni-channel an organization should use that benefit their best ROI? There are so many ways to engage the customer. How can an organization determine the ones that best suit their needs?
This is a very good question, and when I hear it, it makes me think back to the interviews that I conducted where when I interviewed an individual, they may have been the head of customer experience, or they may have been the head of contact centers, or head of infrastructure, or head of digital or e-commerce channels, but the fact is that it was a joint effort among all of these groups. And the first step, they said, to get the maximum ROI and make those decisions is to align among the key leadership and to share key metrics, and also to have similar kind of similar goals that they're working for, and even have in one case, their compensation was aligned around maximizing the customer experience. So the choices are they're clearly overwhelming, and I think all of the organizations we interviewed felt that way too. So it first took their heads of all of those different groups that touch each other and overlap to first have them align and work well together, to share goals, have even their bonuses and compensation aligned by that in some very extreme cases, and then tackle it from there. I can tell you from our model perspective that the ROI is there to be had, but it's really, in many different scenarios, but it's truly based on prioritization of effort, and that's really a leadership issue.
And I want to jump in on that one as well, that and Liz is spot on in terms of the first starting point is the organizational question. But you've seen today some data and statistics from Forrester about channel preferences for consumers. I advise folks that cross-functional team, one of their first, Liz said they should have some shared metrics, et cetera, et cetera. Those are, certainly up there in terms of top importance, but they should all work together as far as doing their own analysis for their own customers of what channels are meaningful and how to prioritize them. Forrester's data is not bad, but it may be a bit different for your organization as to which ones are different in terms of priority and where you plunk down your dollars and investments to go after, this one versus that one versus the other one, because there's no lacking of 1,000 different choices in any contact center organization.
Great. Thanks, Art, and thanks, Liz. I do understand that we are at the top of the hour, but I just want to squeeze in one more question, as I think it's a good one, and I will direct this one to Lisa. What's the difference between an Omnichannel Engagement Center and a CRM system?
Great question, and I'm glad we fit that in since we talked a lot about that in this webinar. And I want to make sure people are clear on understanding that an Omnichannel Engagement Center Solution really acts as a system of engagement. So it's about a collection of people and processes and technology that really helps organizations engage with customers in that very consistent manner across all channels, touch points in their journeys. And when we look at CRM, we tend to think of CRM as being more of the system of record. And as I had mentioned, it's very important as you're pulling together that unified single platform for your Omnichannel Engagement Center that you have an open architecture that allows you to integrate and engage with other systems, such as a system of record with CRM, along with other enterprise systems. So really, we look at it as being a system of engagement versus a system of record.
Great, thanks, Lisa. And so that does conclude the Q&A portion of the event. I know that there were some questions that unfortunately were left outstanding. We'll definitely reply back to you. Someone from Genesys will reply back to you at a later time. But in the meantime, for any additional information, feel free to check out the Genesys webpage around today's topic. You can access it right now. You can go through the link, or you could also just go through the resource list. There you'll find the direct link to the study that Liz discussed. It'll be more in detail there, as well as a direct link to the ROI calculator where you could find your own ROI based on your own situation in about 5 minutes. And so with that, if you have any other additional questions on today's topic that you think of afterwards, feel free to email us at enterprise.programs@genesys.com with the topic of today's webinar in the subject line. And as a friendly reminder, if you could please also fill out the survey that will show up at the end of the webinar providing your thoughts on today's presentation, we would really appreciate it. Feel free to continue to engage with us through any of our social channels, as well as subscribe to our blog, which is updated daily. On behalf of our speakers, Art Scholler, Liz Witherspoon, Lisa Abbott, and myself, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to having you join us again in the future.